Everybody. Welcome to today's episode of the SOPP, the Southern Oregon Progressive Podcast. I'm Kevin Bell, and from here, I'm going to hand it to my co-host, Betsy Cunningham, the one and the only.
I'm Betsy Cunningham, and I'm Kevin's co-host, and we'll go through anybody else in the room. Brett, you want to introduce yourself?
Certainly. I'm Brett Cecil. I'm coming to you from Port Orford this evening, which is where I live in Curry County. So out on the coast of Southern Oregon. I do want to wish everybody a happy Mother's Day, those of you who are mothers here, and to my own mom, shout out all the way to Utah. I got to catch her before she gets to bed tonight. But it's good to see you all.
Right. Anybody else in the room want to introduce themselves?
Sure, Dean Zahner, he, him. I'm just a community member and about a lot of different things in Douglas County. Thanks for being here and good to see y'all. And happy Mother's Day.
Anybody else?
Hi, I'm Max. I'm here just kind of listening. I got a couple other friends here, Ryan and Mark, are hanging out. But yeah, I was just gonna listen for the most part and chime in when I have a chance. But appreciate you all being here.
Anybody else?
Go
ahead.
Okay, this is Frances Etherington. I work with some environmental groups in town, and I'm here today to listen to this. Okay.
Kat.
I'm Catherine. I'm a community member. I'm not friends with anybody, and I really want to hear what you have to say. And I'm so happy to see all the people here.
Anybody else?
I think that's it until our guest.
All right. So our special guest is somebody that I may have actually first met with the Progressive Oregon with Larry Taylor when you did an online interview when that was running. That was in 2016 or 2017.
Wow.
And have actually seen a couple of your other online presentations and really impressed that you have the discipline to do stuff I don't. Because I think civics education for adults and we were talking about it earlier is so important. And so I want, so besides being a teacher and a librarian and the founder of Civics for Adults, you want to tell us more about you and then tell us what you want us to know.
Yeah, well, about 10 years ago, I decided that I was really interested in various civics topics and misinformation, and that with my background as a librarian, so I'm quite good at research and teaching, and that there was a need out there, I just began to put together these workshops. And I initially was only doing them in person. And then, of course, COVID came around, and one of the libraries said, "Would you do virtual workshops for us?" And I thought, okay, let me give that a shot. And so I've been doing both virtual and in person since 2020. And now I've done them for libraries and other community groups all over the country, actually. So I'm just a very strong proponent of lifelong civics education. There's just a real lack of civic literacy out there, and it's because we don't really focus on it. We don't recognize that need, and we don't have outlets for it. And I wish that more libraries, especially, but also other community groups. But I think public libraries are great places for it. So I do 4 workshops. One on misinformation and propaganda, and I'm doing one in person in Silver Falls on Thursday. I have one on citizen activism 101, and which I'm doing for a Portland library in June. I have one on elections and campaign finance, and one which at the moment I'm really keen on, which is called Representation, Our Federal Government and the Constitution. And it covers I have a few slides from that presentation, and it covers a range of things from the status of democracy globally to civic literacy to what are some of our basic rights that right now are particularly salient for us to be aware of. And then I go into kind of how the Constitution was created, because there are some myths around it that I think it's really helpful to ground people in some of the realities of that. And then the last part has to do with the structure of our federal government and structural problems that we have that are really behind, in my opinion, a lot of the problems that we see and that we need to start dealing with. Because, you know, the Constitution, really, they did a pretty good job. One of the things that I show, you know, because there are people, you know, from both ends of the spectrum. And you've got people who say, oh, the Constitution was just this horrible thing written by a bunch of slave owners, and they didn't want really people to have rights. And then you have people on the other end that, you know, think the Constitution was handed to us by God and it's perfect, and it's, you know, and all of that is just really, you know, BS. The no understanding the circumstances surrounding the time period when the Constitution was created and what was happening in the rest of the world. You know, no, we didn't create the perfect democracy. We don't have the perfect democracy now. But considering that the vast majority of the world lived under monarchies and empires, what was done was a leap forward. And the framers of the Constitution didn't expect that people were going to keep it the way it was either. It was a baseline from which we can build. And in some ways, of course, we have, right? But as in most things, 3 steps forward and 2 steps backwards. And right now, we're definitely in a 2 steps backwards stage. So I wanted to mention, you know, some of those structural elements that I think we need to be aware of, and we need to look at when we next have the opportunity, because of course right now we're in crisis, but we need to shift those because that will help keep us from being in further crisis in the future, assuming we get past where we are right now, which is, of course, a very dangerous situation. And then the whole issue of misinformation and how do we deal with that? And, you know, part of it is, I mean, that's such a complicated thing because part of it can be dealt with education. I mean, there are things people can learn and that I go over in my workshop that make people aware of, oh, you know, I didn't think of that when I look at this information that I'm running across all the time. I didn't, you know, think about analyzing it that way or using this resource to find out if it's accurate or not. I mean, that's part of it. But then there's the, you know, the whole issue of we're really faced with something that is brand new because the speed at which information comes at us, you know, the internet and all of that has created a very different environment informationally, and we have not caught up in any way, shape, or form from a legal standpoint. And I'm reading a book right now called now I'm blanking out on it, The Right to Lie, question mark. And it's written by a constitutional law professor. And basically she's dealing with, you know, how do we deal with the huge amount of lying that we've seen, right? I mean, can that be dealt with? And she's very realistic that we have because of our First Amendment, it's a very difficult situation to deal with. But then she proposes some possible ways. I'm reading the book actually sort of for a second time because there's so much there. So trying to find those answers. I know that, you know, Europe has done a better job. I mean, just things like micro-targeting, which is one of the problems that we've had, where social media can literally just target political messages to very small groups of people to sway them. And that's because in this country, our information is for sale, basically. I mean, it's out there. I think of the social media I'm on and, how much people could know about me, and these companies know about me. And so that's a whole nother area. I mean, it's so complicated, but we all need to be, thinking about that. So before I show those slides, is there anything somebody wants to, interject right now, or shall I show you the slides and we can look at them and then talk about anything, the slides or anything else?
Well, I just thought it was very interesting that you brought up the information eggs, especially in the now being the age of AI and all this artificial intelligence, and the importance of double checking your answers against credible sources. Last I checked, a lot of people are just taking Facebook posts at face value, and that's, a detriment to our society and our democracy, because that's how democracy dies, is from the misinformed.
Couldn't agree with you more. And, AI and deep fakes, especially this year, this election year, we really need to be alert to that. And we really need to be slowing down when we run into things that we either like or don't like. I mean, we have a tendency, it's called confirmation bias, that when we see something we like, we almost have a tendency to believe it more and to shuffle it off to somebody else because we all like to be validated, right? So, but don't. I mean, make sure it is really accurate before you do that. So, yeah, it's a very, very dangerous situation. And the closer we get to, of course, this election, but especially the general election, we're going to see, I think, some really outrageous stuff put out there, and we just have to not react immediately, but check it out. So, all right, well, let me start these slides. And okay, don't think I need sound with these, so just go with this. I think I need to tell it to not, is there anything in front of the screen? It should look pretty blank.
Pretty blank.
Okay, pretty blank, good. So let me move this out of my way. I have a bar that I can see. And let's see. Okay, there we go. Now I can actually see the screen. So I want to talk about the House, the Senate, and the Electoral College. So the first problem here with the House, when we started out, when the country started out, we had move something out of the way here. Oops. Oh. Okay. So we had a representative represented about 35,000 people. I mean, it was a big deal that there not be too many people that somebody in the House represented, because you really was supposed to know the people you were representing, right? And then in Congress's wisdom in 1929, they said, nope, we're not adding anybody else. And now on average, a representative represents about 750,000 people, which of course is just really too much. And it's
Donna, it's Brett. Can I make a note on your point there?
yes, go
Because
ahead.
I'm running for a House district in the state of Oregon.
Oh, all
I
right.
have double that population in my district.
You have double that population?
Yeah, it's about 75,000 people in a House district in Oregon.
Okay, so that's right. So that's a state
That's a
district.
state district. So I just want to make that comparison to what you're saying at 35,000 when we started out with the U.S.
Right.
Constitution. It's an interesting
Right.
juxtaposition there. So sorry for the interruption, but
And
I just
that's
made my eyes
fine.
pop.
That's fine. That's interesting for me to know. And there was an original First Amendment, okay, not the one we think of that we know and love now, but that original First Amendment would have limited the number of people that a representative represented to, I think, 50,000. So yeah, we'd have 6,000 people in the House, but we could have made some adjustment. That might be a bit much. That First Amendment actually was passed by the first Congress, but it didn't get ratified. So, I mean, but just it kind of emphasizes the degree to which they thought, really, we don't want too many people, to have a representative represent. So we're beyond that. And there are groups working on this. We don't hear about these things very much, but there are groups, there are people on social media groups and so forth. There's one group that would like to, at the 100th anniversary, right? So 2029, they would like to have something to raise the number of people. And there's, by the way, I have some very comprehensive resource lists on my website, and I have a number of resources about the size of the House, the size of the Senate, and so forth, and reports about that people have written with suggestions to change those things. So you're welcome to download, and they have hot links on them, so you can download those sheets. So anyhow, this is a problem because we're so far away from our representatives in Congress, and it makes elections more expensive, right? So it's, if you have to reach out to an average of 750,000 people, you have to run a much more expensive campaign than if you're reaching out to, 300,000 people or whatever. As a comparison, so OECD is the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. They are basically the industrialized countries. And you can see, and I don't know, there's a little box here blocking this. Here we are over here, right? So in other words, in comparison to other countries and the ratio of representative to the number of people they represent, we are way off the charts practically here. And another chart I don't have here right now, but that I use in my workshop then shows the relationship between this ratio and economic inequality. And what you find is something similar to this, in the sense that we, with this high ratio, are much less, have much less economic equality than most other countries that have a better ratio. And I don't think that's surprising, because if you are closer to the people you represent, you're probably going to be more concerned, about economic equality. And plus, again, your campaigns are going to be cheaper, so you're not going to have to worry so much about big donors and all of that. So this is a structural issue that I think really needs to be attended to. The Senate has the same issue with numbers. There's too many, people that a senator represents. But even more significant, I think, is this disparity among the states, okay? So when we started out, the ratio basically between the smallest population-wise state and the largest was 1 to 12. So a person in Delaware had essentially 12 times the influence in the Senate than a person in Virginia. Okay. Now that ratio is almost 1 to 70. So
I
somebody
was
in
waiting for
Wyoming,
you to pop up Wyoming. I was waiting for that
yeah.
one.
So Wyoming and Vermont are the two smallest states. And yeah, it's bizarre. And then by 2100, Vermont will have 150 times. And so what does this mean? I mean, it means basically we have a Senate that is ruled by a minority of the population. And here's a graphic that captures it. So you've got, 2 states over here that have 4 senators, and all of these states have 56 senators, even though it's an equal number of people.
Yep.
So it creates a situation of minority rule, basically, and that's which you can look at how many things that influences in terms of what happens in the Senate, and appointments and judges, and of course the Electoral College.
Well, and if I could
What?
take a second here, I
Yeah.
just thought it was very interesting because I know as a young person, the reason I got involved was because Bernie Sanders made me feel heard. But it goes to your point that, our elected officials are so far off. They're like celebrities at this point that you can't feel represented. There's no wonder there's a disconnect between, the population feeling unheard and why there's such apathy in our elections to begin with. I mean, what actually turns out in our elections? Not even breaks out the 50% really, in all honesty. So
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, that's the thing is, my question is always, or my thesis here in this workshop, this last part of this workshop is always, are we represented? Do we have a representative government? And a lot of ways we do not. And because of these structural problems. So the last slide here is about the infamous Electoral College, right? And I differ than some people that I hear or see on social media as to what the Electoral College, why it was created, and what it's about. And basically, from my understanding, the point of the Electoral College was at the time, and I go over this a little bit in that workshop. At that time, 95% of the population was rural, and 95% of the population were born, lived, and died within like 30 miles of where they started out. There was no mass communication. People did not know what was going on for the most part in other states. Life was very provincial, very local. So they didn't really, it was hard for most people to understand, to know about the people who might run for president, okay? But they could know about local people who they trusted, who perhaps would be in a position of choosing a president, and they could trust them. However, initially, that idea was reflected in the notion that people would elect electors and the electors would be independent in their decision making. All right. And they could stop somebody who's unqualified for being president. And of course, now we know that isn't an option. So in every state but two, the electors have to vote for the people who win the popular vote. And so if 51% of the people vote for one person, all the electoral votes go to that one person, which is another reflection of, disproportion and lack of representation. And, it's not proportional at all. And so we end up with this crazy situation that we have now. So that's basically what I have. I had one other slide, if you're interested in. I don't know if any of you heard Ryan Schwank. He worked for ICE. Let me find that slide. Maybe it's a little off track.
well, while you're finding that slide, I'm going to put on my Zach hat because Zach is our local historian, and I know he would bring up the very progressive viewpoint of, the Electoral College was originally established to uphold slavery, which, there, I guess, leads some credence to the fact because, with that disproportionate representation, the South had a lot of, votes.
The South had a disproportion. That's true. But I don't think that was the main purpose of the Electoral College. To me, it makes sense, these other rationales that I mentioned.
Donna, can I ask, do you remember the year off the top of your head that the Electoral College was put into play?
Well, it was in the
I can't
Constitution.
remember.
So, I mean, it was wasn't an amendment to the Constitution, although
It was
they
original.
changed some
Got it.
things about how it worked,
Okay.
but it was in the original Constitution.
All right.
So that's why I say, it's like that original idea was, well, most people have no idea about national everybody knew George Washington, but
Well,
that
as
was
you
about
said,
it.
we didn't travel. We lived where we died, and So how would you get
Exactly.
we didn't have radio or television or social
Ex-
media, any of that.
That's right. And you know, an interesting, aside to sort of that idea is that one of the things that especially Madison was hopeful about that things would work in this new democracy was um, there wouldn't be there would be factions that could work off of factions, that because everything was so disaggregated, because people weren't, there was no national sort of working together, that the factions would balance each other out. And of course, that now doesn't work in our world of the internet and mass communication and all of that. I mean, that's just something he couldn't even have conceived of. So that's just kind of an aside. But um,
Not
anyways,
just the mass, not the lack of the difference in mass communication, it's the misinformation, right? And not that, people had problem with telling the truth, forever in human existence, but there was a different type of accountability, I guess, or it was expected that, your leaders would not,
Well,
lie as
the
they
mass
tend to.
influence that can be wielded by one voice now is just incredible.
yeah, I mean,
That's
that
true.
misinformation can be, sent to everybody all at once because of our communication system.
Yeah, and
InfoWars
the
is a
gossip
really good
over
example. Sorry,
Yeah, well,
Betsy.
and the gossip over the back fence, right?
Yep.
Now everything is a back fence, like next door, the app next door, right? It's just out there. And so once it gets out there, so if you look, I would have some, questions about so the Electoral College, that would take an amendment to the Constitution to actually change that.
Yes and no. I mean, that's one approach, but there are others. I mean, you've probably heard of the National Popular Vote,
Yeah, I was gonna ask you that.
which is so that is a system where if, and Oregon has agreed to it, and we're up to enough states that, it takes 270 to win the presidency. And I think we're up to enough electoral votes. I think we're up to about 212 or something. And basically, those states say that when enough states agree to it, of course, that, we'll see if that happens, but then they will pledge that all of their electoral votes will go to whoever wins the national popular vote. In other words, whoever is the popular winner, their votes, regardless of what happens in a state. So that's one approach. Another approach is some form of proportional electoral college vote distribution, which we don't have, so that the state's electoral votes reflect, the different winners. I mean, excuse me, not winners, but the proportion of votes that different candidates received. I mean, that's another approach. So
And that takes a state change, right? That takes a
and
state law
that
change,
takes state changes, right? So yeah.
as
So
opposed to being a winner take all like Oregon is,
yeah,
which most
like
states
every
are.
winner take all is what every state but two now
Yeah.
do.
As that. Yeah.
And it's incredibly, unproportional. So, and there have been attempts to change the electoral college, but it, because people who are benefiting and more, one group is benefiting now, getting winners that are not the popular vote winners. So, it's like what has to happen before before that can change. Maybe it is the state level, but then again, if some states do it and other states don't, so it's a lot that needs to be worked out, but it's worth looking at options because it's obviously, I mean, I think I haven't looked lately at the poll numbers, but my guess is the majority of people do not like the Electoral College. So that's something we need to look at.
So, Donna, on your point, and sorry to interrupt if you've got a train of questions there, Betsy, but I recently became familiar with a project called States Project, statesproject.org, which talks about this whole process you're discussing about the states changing the Electoral College position. So that's
Okay.
something I want to look at a little bit closer, and I thought I'd just bring
I'm
it up.
writing that down. States Project.
I'll see if I can pop it in the chat.
.org. Okay, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I would, for people to, if they don't remember this, that actually the first the first Trump administration, Trump did not get the popular vote. So this is where, the popular vote movement really started to get legs to it, because Hillary did win the popular
Right.
vote.
That's right.
And he won by the Electoral College.
Right.
And if it weren't for the Electoral College, he would have not have been president the first time, and one could argue he wouldn't have made it the second time. But he did win the popular vote. But I also want, because this is Civics for Adults, to be clear that he did not win a majority of the votes.
Yes.
It's a plurality.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't know that. And
Right.
that's an important fact. Yeah.
Yeah. So, people say, oh, he won the majority. I said, no, that's not how math works. So, and you're only, and it's, you can win a majority in a candidate race. So the other thing is, it seems to me that, that there's a fix for the House, which is, allow more House of Representatives, right? Increase the number of representatives in the House.
And the question of how you do that, there are various options for that. And again, I do have some reports listed on my website that describe, there's different approaches. So, take your pick. But
so what would we have Congress people sitting on each other's laps?
Well,
they could go by conference in the big, beautiful, ballroom.
Right. I was just thinking we could expand the ballroom further.
Or add a ballroom to the Capitol.
Right. We veered off topic here.
But no. I mean, that is something people say, well, where are we gonna put them and stuff? That's where there's a will, there's a way, my mother used to say.
Well, we're meeting virtually here. I don't see why Congress at some point couldn't do something similar.
I think there's lots of options. The first thing is just people need to be aware of how we artificially, and interestingly, actually, this thing about the electoral or whatever, about the Senate or whatever, that it being a slave-based thing came up about limiting the House. So it was 1929, and in that decade, that was the decade where there was a resurgence of the KKK. And it was in large part because of the immigration we had. Interesting, right?
Mm-hmm.
In the previous, 20, 30 years, we'd had a tremendous amount of immigration. And most of the people were going into the cities. And so a lot of people, sort of the same sort of group in the Senate that, has this disproportionate power, didn't like the idea, in the House, didn't like the idea of the cities having more representatives, that they would gain more representatives in the northern urban areas. And so that was part of it. So anyways, then you had this, we're going to stop the growth of it. We don't want it anymore because it's going to go against our group, kind of a thing. So, but it's crazy that we have this incredible high ratio, and you look at other countries, who have policies that we like, and they don't, and it's not a coincidence.
If to think about the Senate, the logical thing would seem to increase the number, change the configuration. If you're only going to have two, you can't do that, right? You're not going to address the inequity that creates.
Well, there's a number of options out there for that too. You could, for one thing, look, we have a territory, you might say, on the continent that has a larger population than the state of Wyoming, and it doesn't have representation. And that, of course, is DC. There's 600,000 people that live in DC don't have representation. We have Puerto Rico that doesn't have representation,
Right.
and we have other territories. So right off the bat, you know, DC could be a state. Puerto Rico could be a state. We could divide states. We could combine states. I mean, there are things that could be done that would, you know, balance out this, you know, enormous. I have a chart that shows the population of each state. And it's, you know, you've got like 500,000 Vermont, Wyoming, whatever, and, you know, 40 million almost in California. I mean, just this huge disparity among the states. And, you know, when the framers created this, they didn't do it because, again, from what I read, it's not that they did it because they really thought it was a good idea. Okay, so we got the bicameral or the two-house Congress because the small states basically said, we're out of here if you don't do this. We insist on having equal representation.
Right.
And so it really was forced because the one thing, there was just really one goal at the Constitutional Convention, and that was to keep the country going. I mean, that was it. Everything else was secondary. So if things were going to fall apart because they didn't have this bicameral Congress, then, you know, they did it. But a lot of them really didn't like it. They just were forced into it. And if you look at other countries, most other countries either have no second chamber like we do, or if they do, it's a much, much weaker chamber. So Britain, you know, has the House of Commons, which is basically the Congress, and the House of Lords, but the House of Lords is very limited in what they can do. So we're different in that respect too, having these two big chambers, I mean, these two major chambers in our Congress that often get into this, you know, push-pull that is not, you know, great for us. So
Might we add a third leg to that stool then? So you've got the House and the Senate and something else.
I suppose that's another option, you know? The important thing is that we realize that these problems exist and that we need to be looking at these options, because to just focus on the people that are in office, and this goes for, you know, every level of government, and not sometimes the structure, you know, like in Portland, we radically changed our structure. I mean, sometimes it really is about the structure that gets in the way. I mean, it's why we have the Supreme Court that we have, because of the structure of the Senate, right? So it's just important, I think, that people understand these limitations of our Constitution, and that there's nothing wrong with changing the Constitution. I tell people that, to me, I delineate between the preamble of the Constitution that has all the wonderful values that are outlined, and the structure of the government, because the structure of government was simply, okay, we're just going to do the best we can here to create a government that we think is going to fulfill these values that we have. And none of them walked out of there and thought, you know, it's perfect and you shouldn't touch it. In
But
fact,
I think the brilliance of it, though, Donna, is that it's built with the capability of unfolding and working to cover other needs. What we're talking about right now, how are we going to better represent? We're not going to get away from a representative democracy. It's what we've got, but we don't represent ourselves very well. How can we improve that? And I think that the Constitution was written for that, but I think there's some people that like it the way it is and find it advantageous to keep it the same. So how do we get around that?
I think that's true. The only thing I would add is that it is kind of hard to change our Constitution. We have one of the hardest constitutions to change because,
And with good reason.
well, yeah, but look where we are. So it's like, well, maybe it could be a little easier to change. I mean, like, I don't know if the way we have it right now is, the perfect solution for that, because it's, I mean, the things that we're talking about a lot of things that could be changed, but that
But
would,
it is set up for change if we chose to make that happen.
yes, but if it's allowing a minority of the population to stop that change, then we have right? I mean,
And I was going
That's
to
the
jump on
problem.
that with
That's
you,
the
but I
problem.
see Kat popped her hand up, so she might have something to put in here.
It's also the problem with the supermajority is, again, it's allowing a minority to actually dictate what happens. And the state legislature in Oregon should be a primary example of where that has happened. Numerous times, even with a supermajority in the state legislature. Cat.
Well, I didn't pop up regarding Brett, but what you said about the Supreme Court, can we talk a little bit about the not so Supreme Court and how we could fix their influence? Do you have a workshop on that?
I do not. There's a lot of ideas out there about the Supreme Court too, a lot of good ideas. I mean, it doesn't, the Constitution actually says very little about the Supreme Court. So there's a lot of things that could be done. Not even, I mean, without even having to touch the Constitution. I mean, just through statute, through laws. And that's something that I think people need to, people want to see change. They need to get involved.
So, Kat, are you talking about reforming our Supreme Court? I like that idea.
Yeah, what ideas do you tell us? Your ideas?
Let me see here. Okay, I'm not muted. There is the idea that you can have way more members of the Supreme Court and give them a lot more work that they could accomplish, and that would have a greater variety in the opinions. It'd be harder to stack them. And that's kind of what I focus on when I even think about it.
Okay.
One of the things that people suggest is no lifetime appointments. And also, there's not even really a code of ethics that's in writing. I find that kind of abhorrent that they rely upon the nonsense that it's not in writing. But the reality of that has to be codified in law outside of the Supreme Court. And also keep in mind that the court provision in the Constitution is only about a Supreme Court. And the whole entire structure of the federal court system is based upon statutory law.
Right.
Because it evolved because it was intended to only have one court system. That was even of original jurisdiction. And that's kind of the difference. And the court system is an interesting thing all of its own evolution.
And some people have suggested that not only term limits, but that it be staggered in such a way that every president would get to nominate one or two people,
right?
So that it would really balance out. It would give. I mean, because we know, of course, what happened with
some kind of rotation to the lineup, right?
Exactly. Right.
I just really want to see you put together a workshop on it, because people don't know that we aren't stuck with it the way it is. And I really think that we need to dilute it. We need 120 people on the Supreme Court, and rotating in and rotating out, they could get more work done on greater things of importance. So, Donna, would you work on that, please, and get back to me next year?
Well, I can't guarantee that, but you have given me something to think about here. Something. It's so hard to pick and choose what goes into the workshops, because there's so much that can go into them, and I'm always coming up with new ideas, and it's like, okay, well, what do I have to get rid of now if I'm adding that? But I'm always I mean, my workshops are always evolving, And so I will definitely think about that.
Can I say
One of the things,
good idea, Kat, if I may? I like the way you think in big numbers. 13 was always a number that came to mind for me, but 120 might be something that we could work with.
That's a lot of judges.
Well, you can get a lot done with that many people.
well, and you can look at the federal court appeal system too. They have a structure where there's a review panel and not
Hmm?
the full court sits and review, right? So
Right.
there's
Yes.
ways to structure this.
We've seen that
That would
happening a
be,
lot lately.
yeah. And so, yeah, particularly with all the lawsuits because of our current administration,
yes,
which is phenomenal in and of itself. You know, if he
yeah.
gets any prize, it should be probably the most litigated president in the history of the United States. So,
He
Answering
likes
a lot
litigation.
of questions he's answering and a lot of precedent being set. So we don't need to ask those questions moving into the future, right?
yeah. Well, well, no, because reality is just think about Roe v. Wade being overturned, right? You know, a new court can overturn what is constitutional. Separate but equal was constitutional for many years, right?
Until it wasn't.
So the
That's
reality is that's the problem with courts. They're made up of humans. Maybe AI will take that over and be more objective.
yeah. I mentioned what you just brought up. I mentioned in that workshop, and another example is public defenders. You know, being able to get a lawyer even if you can't afford it. It was only 10 or like 20 years before the decision to require, you know, the courts to provide a lawyer that the Supreme Court said, no, you know, you can't afford it, too bad. And then, you know, new case and yeah, okay. And that was done by a guy who literally hand wrote a petition in the court saying he should have had a lawyer. And it went to the Supreme Court, and that's why we have public defenders now. Or
Yeah.
we try in
Pay for it.
Oregon to have public defenders. We're not
Yeah.
quite living up to that as we should.
So when we were communicating about you doing this today, you also talked about, you know, kind of the crisis we're in right now, you know, and how do we, you know, address that? Because like you said, probably any of these things become academic. You didn't say that. That's my interpretation. If this, you know, if the worst case scenario can unfolds itself in regard to the public. And one of the things is the misinformation or even the use of social media. We have a problem here that actually we didn't get covered in our last SOPP. It was on the agenda, but we went too long. And it's about what I noticed is the Douglas County commissioners, I'm on their email list, right? You know, they send out their newsletter. So for a long time, it's maybe one or two a month, right? And then I noticed like a little bit more happening. And then over the first of the year, I noticed a whole lot more happening. So they're giving out proclamations. They're utilizing any kind of social media they have. They've changed the messaging to say, look at the good firefighters. And instead they say, look at how good we are for supporting our firefighters. So there's this, and I actually had AI do an analysis of this because I'm like I said, we are going to do an SOPP, right, Kevin, sometime soon, even if
I'm
it's
down
just
whenever you are.
recording. Yeah. And then I'm gonna file a complaint with the Secretary of State as well as the Ethics Commission because it's kind of a misuse of media. So we have this media that's venue that now that they've hired somebody to be able to do it, and this is a potential every place. It's kind of like what Trump is misusing media, right? He's using social media, using our tax dollars all the time, you know, to even tell lies. So, you know, I understand the First Amendment issue, but how do we guard ourselves against not just the misuse of misinformation, but just the misuse itself of propaganda?
Yeah, no, that's certainly part of it. I mean, that's really interesting to hear what you're saying about them using it now. I mean, I guess they've learned from, you know, the president that you just get out there and keep pushing your messages, and I mean that's it. And I don't know that it can be stopped legally, but if there's a way that you can counterbalance that, get messaging out there and point out what's happening, that what they're doing, just to make people sort of more conscious of how they are using their platform. I don't know. I mean, that is really oh God, scary. I mean, it's scary.
Well, if they get, these things just kind of hit with wildfire though too, right? Once one person gets away with doing it, all these other, are going to be doing it. Even in the pattern, some years ago they quit allowing general comment at the Douglas County Commissioner meetings, general public comment, where you could just come and tell them anything about public, county business is what the criteria was. And they quit that. But then in the last several years, more and more counties have also started to eliminate that general access piece to their public meetings.
So these people aren't lying about stuff. They're just using it to kind of,
Promote
it's
themselves.
PR for themselves.
Yes, yes, yes. And the
Let's-
analysis was done is not just it's in the format it took. If they're just saying, well, we got better at communication, we hired a communication specialist, we got better at doing that. But when you look at the sheer volume going up so much and then the bent of the story, it's like, oh, look at what the county commissioners did this week. Oh, Tim Freeman was awarded an award by the Association of Oregon Counties, right? This is promotion of Tim Freeman, who's up for, keep in mind, all three of them are up for reelection. So, and the analysis and the AI, and I had AI do it because I don't have enough time in my life to do the kind of that analysis. and it really kind of showed this pattern that said, yes, it looks like, and actually it might violate the Oregon ethics laws. You're a public employee using public resources
Yes.
to promote a
The
gain.
tax dollars. The tax
Yes.
dollars to advertise for their political campaign. And it's over the top and it's crazy.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, if they're essentially campaigning, then maybe
That's what
there
it is.
is some ethics or state law on that. Yeah, I don't
if they-
know what those laws are, but
They
pardon
have
me?
to caveat it with it being paid by their campaign. That'll be
Well-
interesting if that comes out in all of their articles. Because then it is
Well,
a campaign article.
Well, and they're also talking about what the candidates said at forums against them from the dais, right? At their county commission meetings. So they actually are utilizing the forum of their public responsibility to compare themselves as a candidate against somebody else. And so I think there's actually, I think it's really kind of outrageous. That's what happens when you don't have any real challengers. Luckily, we have some really good challengers to them. But the problem with social media, and the one problem that when you look at the analysis, if the county gives all this space to three candidates, all these 11 other candidates against, collectively all three, three of them get none of that.
Right, absolutely. Well, Betsy, I'm going to assume you're going to look into that.
I am.
And check with the state. And I would really be interested if you find that there are some violations, some applicable laws to that. If you would let me know, I would very much appreciate it.
Yeah. So and not and the specific, not just this problem here, but generally, what do we do? How do we help people understand? Because I have people that I think are pretty astute share memes or online stories that I am triggered regarding information and I know it's got to be false, right? So I say, well, wait, where did you get the source? And so we automatically assume. And I was a person who would love to go back to this world where I can rely upon certain people I worked with politically for a long time. If they tell me something, I believe they've proven trustworthy enough to not talk to hear their head rattle, as my mother used to say.
This book I'm reading, in the last part of it, she starts to propose a theory that could help rein in some of it using public employee speech. There's some laws, at least federal employees, and I don't know if this is true for state and local. There's some laws saying, public employees can't speak about certain things. And she thinks the president should be subject to the same thing. So
Gotcha.
I'm just throwing that out. That may be something that you could look into too. Is there any restrictions on public employee speech? And
During their time. During their time.
Yes.
I don't know that, see, with certain employees under the Hatch Act, even on their free time, have to avoid certain political activities. Oregon law does not have that prohibition on your own time and your own dime. It is just really more around the utilization or speaking on behalf, right? But there's been court cases that is a sheriff when he shows up to a campaign event. Is he misusing public dollars?
Right.
But it
Well,
says right now,
if these folks are using their bully pulpits, I mean their social media that's on their emails, that's part of their job, then that's not their own times,
right.
So
But with the sheriff uniforms, that was actually said, okay, they can do that, because it's not a substantial thing. But it's not, they're not talking as a campaign candidate, but I don't even know. Well, actually, I think they have shown up at campaign events for different things as a
It's
sheriff.
ridiculous with the sheriff on every flyer for these guys. Who are we running against? Are we running against Tim Freeman, or are we running against the sheriff? Because he's on every one of their flyers.
And not up for re-election this year. So
correct. I wondered.
Yeah, but there is, under the Federal Hatch Act, like I said, some federal employees have heavy restrictions on what they can do politically, and particularly, but not most federal employees, but all of them, state and federal, on their own time, right, and their own dime, they're not prohibited. But with the problem is, even with the president, I mean, I understand that argument that the president is using their paid time representing us, doing politics, which would be a violation of the Hatch Act if he were subject to it. And his cabinet members apparently aren't either. So,
Well,
so we just have to grin and bear it.
It's about enforcing the Hatch Act. It's there. It just isn't enforced.
Well, that becomes another whole subject of a show. What do you do when the federal government doesn't follow the law?
Yeah, when it's all being run by one guy, the authoritarian at the top, the Justice Department becomes that person's personal law office. They'll do whatever you tell them to do. And one thing they're not doing is going after the Hatch Act. So I'll leave it there.
Well,
yeah,
I
thought law enforcement couldn't endorse or promote, because there was an article today about, it was somewhere up the coast, like Newport, or somebody's running for the Senate, and it was one of the officers, and there was a to-do about that because but law enforcement typically isn't supposed to. They're supposed to not endorse people, I thought. But maybe that's not a law. I don't know. I find it, I'm like you, Betsy. I just don't understand why because then you kind of think, would he protect us of being Democrats? I mean, I don't know.
Maybe you need to do a whole show on this. Get some experts on this particular type of law. Then let me know, because I'd love to watch it.
This is what happens all the time here, though. Well, and it brought me to an interesting thought, which we've discussed change a lot here, not only at the federal level, but also at the local level in regards to a home rule charter and things like that. And, what's some of your thoughts on regards to that? Because what I'm hearing a lot of is, because the county commissioners and there is no set of rules, that they have a lot of leeway. And the only way to really remedy that is to enforce rules through a voter guide, which, I mean, voter participation.
The only thing I know about, really, I have to claim ignorance here. The only thing I know about home rule charters was what I learned recently by talking to the elections person from Clackamas County, who is elected, and she said and I think she said that there are 9 home rule charter municipalities. I don't know if that
Counties.
word goes for
Probably
counties too, but
Yeah.
and they appoint elections people. But if you don't have a home rule charter, then you elect them. That's all that I learned that day. But so I don't really know a lot about home rule charters, I'm afraid.
Well, it's
Except
kind of the idea you said of changing your own constitution, because the charter is the constitution of the county or the city,
right,
right? So
right,
it is that, and kind of reconstruct it to the government you want, right? As long as it's allowable under state law. And under state law, if you're a home rule charter, you have more individual authority as a local government than you do if you are a general rule
right.
charter, which is more state, but that's pretty loose still anyway. But we have had problems where we couldn't do term limits and campaign finance reform. Now that has kind of changed because of the whole thing that happened with the
Right.
vote on campaign finance, that it should be able to do that. But there are things like that local government, like you said, Portland changed their whole government, right? So that we could actually, do something like that, and having a citizens assembly to try to figure out what people think might be the best way going forward.
Yeah.
Anybody have any questions for Donna? Any other comments?
Well, do check the website, do check the resource list because they're really comprehensive. And if you check out the sheet that describes workshops, if you know any groups that might be interested, let me know. I really appreciate being invited back
Yeah,
here,
thank you so
Betsy.
much.
And it's so wonderful that you folks are doing this and you keep at it. And it's really important. This kind of stuff is really essential to a democracy. And so you're doing the work. I'm going to be out there on Saturday. I've signed up to a Common Cause has a statewide, if you haven't heard of this, a voter education and election protection program. So I've signed up to have shifts to monitor our local drop box. And just to not to be right next to it, but to be near enough that I can see if any funny stuff is going on. And if so, then I call it in or depending upon what's happening, call 911. But so I'm going to be working on that. And this is kind of a trial run for the general election. They're not overly concerned with this, but and I'm concerned about the general election. So that's something we're doing. Do you do any honking waves? We call them honking waves up here. Like I'm out on this at a certain corner with a bunch of people once a week for an hour. We're holding signs. We get a lot of support.
We just call them rallies, and we do a lot of
Rallies.
them. We
Okay.
do a lot of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is like a
Yeah,
regular thing.
well, we do mostly, but I didn't see Shades of Blue out there Saturday. Saturday, Indivisible is out on one street, and then Shades of Blue is out on another. That they pretty regular on Saturday, every Saturday. But we have had some phenomenal numbers show up to No King's Rally and these major rallies that happen periodically. We've had
Yeah.
up to 2,000 people show up in Roseburg.
Wow.
And that is huge numbers, because the usual suspects here over the 35 years I've lived here tend to be around 30, 60 people at a rally for anything progressive. So it's actually is pretty heartwarming to see that. And then the whole conversation, as like ICE is going to come, wants to look for office space. And so there's been a big fight back against that's going on right now in our, getting our city to at least acknowledge they're going to follow the State Sanctuary Promise Act, which they by law have to follow. So,
Well, if
yeah,
any of your local people, library people, whatever, are concerned about, partisanship or whatever, for me, tell them to talk to the library at Lakeview. Or maybe Bend, but Lakeview would be, it's a very conservative area, and maybe that'll reassure them. They were
besides
really
it, besides the library, what about the potential partnership with the community college? Because there's a
yeah. Well,
not that into it anymore.
I did the workshop I did in March was for one of them was for it was a kind of like a community college institution in northern Minnesota, like right at the Canadian border. So they were called themselves, it was a county higher education center, and they did all kinds of classes and stuff, and they found me online. Yeah, I mean, I'm open to, any group that's willing to sponsor and, cover the cost. And
All right. Any more comments?
I just wanted to
Questions,
quickly, if I
Don?
may, ask Donna. Donna, have you been a part of any education with your group here in Curry County? Do you remember in the past 3 or 4, maybe
part
even
of
5 years?
what did you call it?
Any community education like we're discussing with your
Oh, no,
Civics for adults?
No. The only thing I've done in your area were those workshops for the League of Women Voters of Umpqua Valley.
Okay.
So I think that's the closest.
Because I know we had someone here locally that worked with the League of Women Voters in Curry County at our community college, Southwestern Oregon Community College, and the campus in Brookings. And they did I think it was a 2 or 3 session workshop, and it was around basic civics. So I was just trying to figure out if maybe you were involved in that one or not. But I know there are a number of people doing it, but that might be something I'll think about trying to put together here.
I think it would really rock down there in Brookings. Yep. I think it would really go over great.
Good. Thanks for that, Kat. I appreciate it.
I'm trying to
All right.
think.
Well,
I think I did a workshop.
So much.
I did a workshop somewhere on the coast, the sort of, I don't know, south, but more than halfway down. But they didn't get a lot of response. But libraries, I'll tell you, libraries tend to be, and I say this as a librarian, they tend to be terrible at marketing. And what they do is they send out notices to like all the people who are already coming to the library. This is what happens. So people who would be open to something like this never hear about it. And that's the problem with libraries. I mean, we're all sort of terrible marketers.
We tend to sing to our own choirs, right?
So.
Or you're busy researching, some of the smartest people in the country are librarians, that's, that even the law offices when I worked in, if we had a question of, factual information, we'd call the local librarian research person, That is so thank you for being a librarian. I love librarians, and the Defenders, one of the first
days. God, that's a long time.
They were one of the first people that came out against the Patriot Act.
Yeah,
right,
that's
librarian.
damn right.
So they've always been standing up for our rights. So, and thanks for doing the civics for adults. Really, I think it's very, very important. And, hopefully more and more people will start to pay attention, that maybe they realize that they don't know what they should know. and
well, thanks for supporting Civic for adults.
Yeah. All right. So, yeah, no problem. Thank you. So, all right. Do we have anybody else who wants to bring up something? Francis, you wanted to talk about Yoncalla and
okay, I'm going to slip off then.
Yes. Take
care, everybody.
Bye, Donna.
Take heart. Let's just keep working at this, and
we really appreciate you coming out, Donna. It's meant the world, and we've learned a lot. And hopefully you can come out in the future and participate with some other stuff. And maybe we'll, if you're willing, go through some of your other workshops together.
That'd be great. Thanks very much. Appreciate you
right.
all. Take
Night.
care.
All right. Francis, is she still here?
I don't see Francis.
All right. Francis, before we came on, mentioned a protest in Yoncalla over uh, a logging site, Yoncalla, that was an injunction was gotten against the logging company. Does anybody in here know anything? Kat, have you heard anything about it?
Nope, that's totally news to me.
All right. So I did ask
Yeah.
Francis to send me some info.
I was just
Um,
wondering where it's at in Yoncalla, if she has any information, because that's where I live. But I'm assuming there's
She's
there's a lot of area between Drain and Yoncalla, and that, I mean, it's all mismatched BLM, National Forest. But I mean, they've done some disgusting things over the years anyway, like up near the Smith River. If you go out by Waverly Creek, they logged all of that in there right up to the river. I mean, it's just like, it's horrible. But if you get me some information, I'd be interested in where it's at.
Yeah, it'd
yeah,
be really interesting to know if it's on the place where they want to put the reservoir, because that is something like 300 miles of fish-bearing streams.
yeah, like I said before we went on, I did ask her to send me stuff and I would send it out. So if I get it, I will put it up on the Southern Oregon Progressive Podcast Facebook page, and I'll send it out to folks on the email list too, as well as how any other way I can get it out there for you. Because actually, she said the protest was tomorrow because they're logging the property anyway. They're violating. Well, it sounds like they're violating the court order. Does anybody else have anything else they want to talk about?
Well, on that note, Betsy, a couple things I remember her saying was Highway 38. It was old growth BLM land. They were doing a rally on Monday. So I'm just looking real quick to see if I can find anything on a Google search
right.
about that. So go ahead.
Anybody else have anything else they want to bring up?
Where is Zach? I dropped in for my dose of Zach.
He got wind of that, decided not to come.
Told you I don't have
No.
any friends.
I think that he is very busy with his work as the doctor of programming. He's involved. He's in a variety of activities. So
Oh, and it's
he did
midterms, isn't it?
probably, and so he is a teaching assistant and he grades a lot of papers and stuff. So he has and we're talking about doctoral kind of papers, so they're not easy. They're not memes size. He has to just push through. So, and it couldn't be any of it. Maybe not even any of those things. I'm just assuming, but he sent his apologies and said he'd really like to be here. So let me see. Anybody else? Anybody have anything that's going on? We have an election. Last I saw, we had a really, really low voter turnout so far, but I haven't looked in the last couple of days. So
That's not surprising.
county. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what ends up happening,
yeah.
period.
Right. Well, I was just gonna say, I think we're trying to do a Memorial Day flea market slash barter fair, and that's coming up like in a couple weeks, right?
Yeah.
23rd,
Yeah,
the
Memorial
Saturday
Day weekend.
23rd is the
Right.
first weekend.
Yeah, I was thinking it was like this weekend for a minute because I was being worried
Next.
it was like too late. But yeah, I think we're gonna start promoting that and kind of like have a flea market behind my shop at the Frog Lake Studio. Speaking of which, just like an update on my little studio, I'm making it like more accessible and kind of getting more organized and drawing every day again. And because I recently got away from I was working at the News Review I wasn't doing very much art, but now there's like all kinds of stuff going on. So anyway, if anybody needs t-shirts or buttons or stickers or whatever, we can print stuff like that, or even just black and white copies. So I just thought I'd plug that. We're over here on Stevens, and it's yeah, you can just make an appointment or something. Get a hold of me.
Where do I get a hold of you, Max?
I can just like call me or um, email me or whatever. I can give you my number, 541-671-1025. You can call me.
Are you making buttons?
I was gonna, because I keep selling them at the new coffee shop down the street, and there's like so many people apparently that buy buttons, so like with cool stuff on them. So yeah, I make some buttons, whatever you need on them.
What do you mean by you can
Forgot
make some
about-
buttons, Max? It sounds like you don't have materials or something.
Yeah, no, I've got all the button supplies for 2 1/4 inch buttons, for pin back buttons. I'd like to get some magnet back buttons. That'd be cool. But
What are your costs? What does it
they're
cost to
pretty
have
cheap.
you do it?
Like $2 a button or something, or $1 a button if it's a lot.
You just don't know. You're not a capitalist, damn it.
And you can talk with them later. You know, this is on a
Yeah,
YouTube channel. This is
I was
going to be
gonna
on
say,
YouTube. So, hey, the promotion is fine. The business transaction can go off there. Anybody else have anything they want to add? Kevin, anything exciting in the world of politics?
No, not interesting that I found. Remember to vote, everybody, and I'm hoping to see an interesting outcome, and that's all I can say. I was just filling out my ballot the other day, and that was fun. So that's all I can say about that.
Did you turn it in yet?
Yeah, I've already turned it in. I turned it in. I got it. Went to the courthouse here and turned it in the same day.
Good job. Thank you for that.
Well, you're not in my district, Brett. And
I do have phone
vote.
banking available if anybody would like to phone bank.
Yeah, I'm a neighborhood leader here, so that's the max I'm doing. It is I actually wait till the last day to vote. And so some people just don't, who knows what we could find out about you between now and election day.
Yep. I'm waiting until
I'm normally a procrastinator anyway, so hey, it fits well with my
Can I make a quick
philosophy of life.
suggestion on your
Sure.
ballot? I don't know what they look like in other places, but this year in Curry County, our ballot essentially was one page. On the back, one little teeny square for the PCP. So unless people flip that over and actually look at both sides of the ballot, I almost missed it. So I thought, let me look at the back just to be sure. And it was one thing on the back of the ballot. So just make sure you look at both sides.
All right. So we are doing the People's Homeless Commission. Some of those videos should be up soon. That I'm involved in that. Max is involved in that, and some other people in the community. Ruth Smith is the city councilor, and we've actually got some pretty good planning ideas out there to kind of push the city in the direction of doing the right thing. Oh yeah, and Dane, I forgot that Dane is also involved in that. So, hopefully it's kind of like a parallel citizens assembly where we just decided we're going to just start meeting, but bring in these resources, try to find stuff or try to get videos out or audio out so people can hear what we're talking about. And so, hopefully be able to successfully address homelessness, or at least, if not have elected officials in November, because city council election is not until November and it's a one and done. And that's the place that change needs to happen to make significant change in Douglas County regarding homelessness. And there's also an election in Sutherland too. And so they actually have a Hastings Village that needs better management. And so they actually probably need some different people on the city council to make sure that happens too. So I say that even though it's November, because if you're going to run for office, you should start running now.
Yeah,
So
so those
if
are
you're
city
running for,
councils, right? Those local
yeah,
seats. But
yeah.
also, let's think ahead to next May because special district elections. I'm already starting here trying to pump people for library boards and school boards and that type of thing because we always wait until the month before people have to file, which is February, and it's really hard to get people involved. But if we start now, maybe we can find some good candidates to run in our local districts.
Max, you're still running for mayor, aren't you?
I was thinking about it. Yeah, I mean, I still have to do the paperwork or whatever, and like, I don't know. I mean, that other guy's running too, the Corey Wellman guy, and I don't think we want him to be the mayor. So,
Well, then you need to
like I
displace
said, I
him.
don't know. Yeah, like I think it's kind of crazy because I don't really think of myself as a person that could be a good candidate, but like if I actually had like some more organizational stuff going on where I learn how to do it.
You got a
I don't
whole
think
bunch of
there's a lot
really good
you have
people
to
here that
Yeah,
can
no, it's
help you
great.
with that.
It's just like we're doing a lot of stuff at once, so it's kind of like, well, we're what I want to do is make my campaign about just comics and actually like do informational comics. Like speaking of misinformation and stuff, we need really easy to read stuff that's reliable, and and that's what I have trouble like focusing and finishing those kinds of projects because there's not like a huge like immediate incentive, and I don't know, it's hard to do on like by myself. Like I need to be in a room with people, like, and so we need to have more meetings and stuff like this. And because I already got a good one we were just talking about earlier, the last year it was about the firefighters, this year it's about them talking about it's really all out in the open. It's really ridiculous shit, and everybody kind of can see it. So I just feel like it needs that extra push to kind of like make fun of it, and I don't know, make it more reliably informational. So
Organizer.
When is
Maybe
this mayor election?
what was that?
When is this mayor election? I don't live in
In
Roseburg.
November.
No.
It's in November. And yeah, I want to focus on what Donna was saying, like how it doesn't really matter. We need to focus on the systems and the structure, and like the way Larry Rich does things. Of just the way I've observed is like a lot of just pushing people out of conversation, saying ridiculous shit that is not true.
Yes, don't
Being
ever say ridiculous stuff like he says.
no
Right.
shit. Well, I mean, it just kind of like redirects the conversation and like legitimizes this insane crap.
Other side.
Huh?
There is no other side.
Right. Yeah, anyway, I just saw him at the Habitat for Humanity grand opening down there, which was pretty cool. But yeah, of course he's getting on his campaign, he's going to be congratulating all the people he can and doing this thing. That's what he's good at. But yeah, this Corey Wellman guy, I mean, I was
Yeah.
I don't know, he just came out of nowhere. I don't see him doing anything, so he's not in the public like
Let's get you doing it. Betsy, can I make a suggestion to Max before we go?
sure.
Think of yourself as a candidate, Max. This nibbling around the edges, it's not going to get you in there. So start thinking about yourself as a candidate and how you would address that. Gear yourself for it, right? It's 6 months away. So start building some little campaign ideas right now and take a serious whack at it. You may not win the first time. There's always a second time.
Yeah,
And
no,
the
From the guy who's
third.
running for the third time.
There's
no,
Brandy is running for the third time. So you don't have to win them all, but you have to be steady and have the same message. And I already think of you as a candidate. If you need something, you should hit me up on the messenger.
Okay, yeah, I appreciate it.
Do it.
Yeah, the collaboration is what really fuels my stuff with that. So I need to reach out more. So thanks, everybody.
All right, I think we're done. As always, if you have topics for discussion you want to throw our way, and we'll see if we can find somebody who knows a lot about it. So just and if you want to do a show yourself, you're welcome to do that too, right? You can lead the discussion. So thank you for being here, and I will see you next week.
Thanks for having us. It's good to see all of you.
Thanks, everybody.